Okay, so this is a short video which is just to give us a little bit of an understanding of where we are up to. At the moment we should have been making progress on assessment 1 already, which is the individual task, and I'll go through that shortly with you. So that's all individual work. However, you are really encouraged to collaborate on section A of that assessment. Assessment 2 is developing a toolkit, which is section A and section B, where we are working together as a group. Section C is individual work, and I'll come back to that. The reason for this video is essentially for assessment 3, which I'm going to launch, and assessment 4 already. So that's 4 assessments which will be undergoing in the course out of the 5 that we have. So this is to give you an understanding of those and why. Okay, so in our student version of a scheme of work here, we can see that on the Tuesday within the Easter, we actually carried out assessment 1 and assessment 2 activities were launched, and we spent a lot of time planning and implementing what we're going to do in assessment 2 as a group. Here we just come down to this section here, which is the 19th of April. And we've got assessment 3 launched and assessment 4. Those are on Moodle. I'm going to go through those shortly. Just draw your attention over to this right hand side here where we've got the colours. I love my colour coordination. Assignment 1 is well underway, and that's due in within the fortnight, the next time we meet. Again, that will be a workshop, so we can finish things off if we need to. Ideally, we should have carried out all the group work that we need to for assignment 2 by that point, and probably just be putting the finishing touches into place on certain things, maybe in assignment 1, 2 and possibly 3. But please do manage your time, really the idea is to within that 3-hour session to ask for support and if you would like things to be checked before submission. Assignment 3 is a very short assignment, and that is launched this week, and it's due in within 2 weeks. The reason for that being, it is essentially a planning assignment, which I'll go through with you shortly. And if we scroll down a little bit, we can see assignment 4, which I'm launching at the same time. Essentially, assignment 3 and 4, they should follow on, and whatever we have planned is technically what we will be displaying in a sharing of best practice, and that'll be carried out during half term. Okay, so that'll be Wednesday, the 1st of June, and that will be assessment 4, or a large part of assessment 4. Okay, so here's the things that we should already know. We're looking at assessment 1, technology awareness and development plan. If I just scroll past the criteria for the units there, so that was launched a few weeks ago, and the intended submission date is 2 weeks from today, the 2nd of May. Section 8, as we previously mentioned, that is designed to be a research task, reviewing different technologies, which we did some of on the morning session. At least 3. It can be more. I encourage it to be more, but at least 3 technologies you need to review from your research. From that point, we looked at section B, which is the essay, separated into 3 sections, 750 words, double-line spaced, and with Harvard referencing. Section C is quite an important part here, and this is essentially where we are creating and providing a development plan for ourselves, and that is something which we should really use the technologies that were reviewed in section A and start to filter and put information in relating to a development plan, an action plan for ourselves relating to our digital literacy skills and the use of technologies, particularly within our teaching and learning. And this links up to section C of assessment 2. Assessment 2, as we remember, is developing a toolkit. And again, I'll just scroll through the criteria here, section A, section B and section C. Again, this is due in on the week beginning the 2nd of May, so 2 weeks from today. I'm just going to scroll past sections A and B. I know we made a really good start on those on the Tuesday during Easter, particularly in the afternoon. Now, if we come down to section C, reflective review. This is following we've carried out that group activity and produced evidence for sections A and B of this assessment. This is where we are producing it on a separate document, header that document, section C, reflective view, assessment 2, and there's two things that we need to do within a 500-word reflective review, and this is really considering what we have for section C of assessment 1, that development plan. What's the next stage? So have we already carried out our short-term goals in reviewing and researching different technologies, or for example different tools which might help with our questioning and informative assessment for learning? So have we used Nearpod possibly to ask questions? Have we used Socrative? Have we used different types of technologies? There's a whole range of technologies out there for each different element, and depending on what you're looking to carry out. It might be reflecting in terms of how are we viewing that flipped classroom, or any particular model of blended learning that we're interested in. What's the next steps for that? So that's 500 words, and again, as much as we can, let's incorporate Harvard referencing, which relate to the pedagogical positive elements within our practice. Now, as we just scroll back up in assessment 2, back up to section B, so this is largely our toolkit, which is divided into a whole host of separate tasks, which we should be providing within our toolkit or handbook on different pages with different headers and sections or chapters. If we just scroll down to this 5th section, this is something which we each have to do within our group. And within this 5th section, that it goes across 2 pages. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different parts that we need to do. This is where we start to think about providing a separate case study for evidence in each of these following 6 points. Now, just within there, just want to draw your attention to point 3, produce a lesson plan for use in blended or online learning. You don't actually have to do this in your practice, but be smart about this. Certainly point 3 and point 4, the lesson plan and rationale. To make things easy, tick 2 boxes off at once, essentially. I'm just going to go to assessment 3. And assessment 3 is titled Planning to Implement in Curriculum. So this is where we're actually going to be embarking on doing something within our lessons. I'll scroll past the criteria again. There are 2 tasks. Section A, lesson or learning plan, because I've not called it just simply a lesson plan because our blended learning might take the form of a flipped classroom where information delivery would be provided beforehand, before that lesson time. So I've outlined it as a lesson/learning plan. Produce up to 3 lesson or learning plans. Now here's the key, up to 3. The reason being, we need to identify unfamiliar technologies that are used within a learning period. So that might be 3 lessons in 1 week. It could be different lessons which kind of follow on in some format, but I'm considering them as learning periods, which could be beforehand information delivery, then the actual classroom session, and a following activities which could be on Moodle. Up to 3 is the key here. The learning outcomes which we particularly need to be focused on here, 1.1 from Unit 2, and 1.1 and 1.2 from Unit 4. Just scroll up to those. Use a range, remember a range is at least 3, of unfamiliar technologies for teaching and learning. It might be that you have planned to use 3 different technologies within the same lesson. Therefore, you'd only have to produce one lesson or learning plan. So that, for some of us, might be technology overload, but for some of us might be doable. It might be a case where we only have 2 session plans or learning plans, or we might have one bit of technology used and a different piece of technology used in 3 separate learning plans, depending on how you see things fitting into your curriculum best. Section B is essentially a rationale or rationales. However many learning plans we produce in Section A, we need to have learning plans for Section B. Now, this is the link from Assessment 2. If your case study that you produce, let me just flip these to the side. If your case study that you're producing here in Section B, produce a lesson plan for use in blended or online learning. If that has 3 technologies in, fantastic. You're essentially carrying out the requirements of Assessment 3 within that as well. So that evidence can be used for Assessment 2 and Assessment 3. And it's just a case of making that clear. And you can discuss that with me to confirm. Okay, so finally, last part, Assessment 4. This is more of a bit of information to make you aware of what Assessment 4 is and how it follows on from Assessment 3. Assessment 3 is where we should be actually carrying out what we have planned in our 3, 2 or even 1 learning plans and rationales that we've provided. So that's the pre-delivery and implementation into curriculum. Assessment 4, this is not due in for a while, and we've got quite a while for this. It's due in Monday the 13th of June. However, Wednesday the 1st of June, which is the half-term week, is where we will be carrying out our Section A, which is sharing best practice. It's important to be aware of these things before we go into actually producing our session plans and what we're going to be doing in our lessons. For many of us, it should be quite straightforward and really use this as a ticky off list for what you need on the day, but be aware in advance. For example, copies of your lesson or learning plans are important because it's all about sharing. You're going to be video recorded during a short, typically 20-minute period, where you're going to share what you have actually done in your teaching practice. So you're going to provide your peers who will observe you with copies of your learning plans. You're going to demonstrate by talking through or showing, or a combination of both, the use of the learning technology which you applied in the curriculum. And when you're presenting in the overview, provide all of these things within the list below. So what the learning technology is, if it was on a learning platform, so if Moodle was used, for example, what digital resources were used, what assessment tools were used, etc., etc. And that can be assessment for learning, doesn't have to be summative assessment. And typically assessment for learning would fit in with that very well. So some sort of questioning tools or something which you might have found in your review. From here, that third bullet point there with 4 points underneath just indicates what people will be doing on the day when others are presenting. And so that evidence that we need to collate is what we can submit a copy of, which will sit alongside the video, which has shown that you've met the criteria in Section A. Following that, from Wednesday the 1st, we have reflection and improvements. So you'll use the information which you've got, your feedback from your peers in the classroom on that day, what's been written up for you, and also put your own thoughts and reflections into that. You might already have a draft of that written up in advance, but you don't have to. Finally, just from that day, from the 1st, I'll be launching Assessment 5 with you as well.